Welcome to Peenemünde, 1944. The fragment that begins this account was discovered in 1972, locked inside a rusted ammunition crate beneath the northern watchtower of the V2 testing ground. It bears no name, no unit insignia, only a faint pencil heading, Nachtwache Buch Station Nord Entry 14, Ice 44. The handwriting is hurried, slanted, and pressed deep into the paper, as if written while standing. The first paragraph reads simply, 01:47 hours. Patrol 2 failed to return from shoreline sweep. Their lamp signals seen once then extinguished. Wind calm, no aircraft. Sand shows impressions, 3-toed deep direction unknown. Marks end 10 meters from surf. No drag, no struggle, no prints returning. I marked position with red flag, but when we came back with Hauptmann K, the flag was gone, no trace. Ordered to seal report under V2 security classification. Do not speak of this again. The sheet continues on a torn piece of blueprint paper, still in pencil. They said it was the tide, but the tide does not walk. Nothing else is written. No patrol names, no signatures, no corresponding radio log. When archivists first examined the fragment, they believed it a hoax. But microscopic imaging revealed the watermark of the Heeresversuchsanstalt Peenemünde Technical Division, identical to those used in official range test reports. Chemical tests found traces of iodine and copper consistent with exposure to marine corrosion near coastal artillery. And yet in all surviving Wehrmacht records, there is no Patrol 2. The duty roster for that week skips from the 13th to the 18th of September. The nightly weather entries are missing. The sequence ends with a single stamped word, Geheim. 4 nights erased. 4 men reassigned to posts they never reached. 4 lines of ink that survived against orders. This is where the silence begins between what the document states and what the archive refuses to confirm. The shore where the footprints ended has since eroded into the Baltic, and the coordinates no longer match any modern map. But the handwriting remains, and the question it leaves is simple: what kind of tide leaves tracks that do not return? Before we continue, leave a comment where you're watching from and the exact time you paused. What did you feel in that silence? The surviving fragment from Station Nord Peenemünde was first catalogued in 1972 by Dr. Hilde Krantz, an archivist of the Landesarchiv Greifswald, who specialized in post-war recovery of incomplete Wehrmacht technical files. Krantz's team had been tasked with reassembling documents relating to the Heeresversuchsanstalt Peenemünde, the German Army's secret weapons research center on the Baltic coast, operational between 1937 and 1945. Most files had been seized by Soviet forces after the war, later divided between Moscow and East Berlin. The Nachtwache Buch fragment, however, entered the archive through an unofficial channel, discovered not in a military depot, but in the private collection of a deceased engineer, Karl-Heinz Fromm, whose estate was inventoried following his death in 1971. According to the estate record, Fromm had worked as a maintenance technician for the electrical unit of Peenemünde's Test Stand 7, responsible for monitoring radar synchronization during V2 rocket launches. After the Allied air raid of August 1943, much of the northern perimeter, including the coastal observation posts, had been damaged and abandoned. By September 1944, those sectors were sparsely manned, used only for security patrols and shoreline reconnaissance. Fromm's surviving correspondence, addressed to his wife in Bremen, mentions ghost shifts, skeleton crews, assigned to keep night watch on installations no longer functional, but still classified. In one letter, dated 10 September 1944, he wrote, "We are told to record movement, but there is nothing to see. Only the sea hums louder each week. They say sound carries differently now, something about pressure changes." When Krantz received the log fragment from the estate inspector, she found it folded within a copy of Die Rakete, a 1942 engineering periodical once circulated internally at Peenemünde. The page carried graphite smudges, identical to those on Fromm's maintenance notes. The ink analysis matched the graphite's composition: high carbon, low zinc, used in standard-issue German Army pencils. Krantz annotated her first archival report in March 1972, concluding the handwriting was consistent with technical staff rather than command officers. In other words, whoever wrote the Nachtwache Buch entry was likely a subordinate, a technician guard or range observer, not a ranking officer. Peenemünde during that phase of the war had become both a fortress and a ruin. The British bombing of August 1943 had destroyed the housing blocks and the staff mess, but the underground control centers remained operational. Test Stand 7 resumed launches by mid-1944, under extreme secrecy. Witnesses in post-war interrogations described the coastline as eerily silent, windless, without birds. One Royal Air Force reconnaissance pilot, Flight Lieutenant James Kendall, reported in an October 1944 debrief, "Smoke patterns over the North Shore are inconsistent with industrial exhaust. They rise, disperse, and then reform at sea level. The pattern behaves like a pulse, almost rhythmic. His report, declassified in 1991, sits today in the British National Archives under reference AIR 402593. Cross-referencing both the Kendall report and Fromm's surviving letters, establishes the physical conditions of the site during that September calm: winds, heavy moisture, fluctuating barometric pressure, and intermittent magnetic disturbances affecting radio transmission. Technical units had begun to document interference bands appearing on monitoring screens, sometimes mistaken for moving objects. One technician's marginal note reads simply, "Not mechanical, not storm." The recovered Nachtwache Buch fragment belongs to that period. Its absence from official logs suggests deliberate suppression. Kranz's subsequent attempts to locate the parent volume, the full Station Nord Watchbook, led her to a secondary collection housed in Berlin's Militärarchiv der DDR. Within a box labeled Peenemünde, Sicherheitsposten, 1944, she found cross-indexed references to night patrols suspended after incident and shoreline restricted beyond Point Blau. The signatures below those notes corresponded to officers already deceased or untraceable. No mention of footprints, no report of missing men, only a one-line remark. Material loss: 4 units of signal lamp battery. Kranz included that annotation in her 1973 journal article Archivstudien zur Heeresversuchsanstalt Peenemünde Band 4, where she cautiously described the document as anomalous. The journal's editorial board, operating under East German censorship, requested that she remove the passage referring to the footprints. The published version omits the phrase, replacing it with a general note. Patrol failed to return due to environmental hazards. The uncensored draft remained in Kranz's personal papers, sealed until her death in 1989. What makes the document remarkable is not the content itself, but its placement within a wider pattern of inconsistencies. Multiple surviving logs from September 1944 show identical time gaps across separate divisions: meteorology, communications, and security. Entries jump by 3 or 4 days, as though the routine act of recording had momentarily stopped. This break is uniform, beginning precisely on the 14th and resuming on the 18th, matching the missing sequence in the Nachtwache Buch. In 1978, an independent historian, Dr. Rolf Naumann, gained permission to re-examine Kranz's findings. Naumann was a specialist in the sociology of secret labor during wartime, and his interest lay in what he called the human residue of classified systems. His research led him to interview surviving Peenemünde workers, now living in Rostock and Hamburg. Several remembered the shoreline patrols and the order to avoid them. One witness, Gerhard Müller, who had served as a messenger for the electrical unit, recalled, "They told us not to go north after sundown. We joked it was because the rockets haunted the beach, but after 1 week, no one laughed anymore." Folklore in this case emerges not as legend, but as repetition. In 3 separate oral testimonies recorded by Naumann, the same phrase appears: "The tide does not walk." None of the interviewees claimed to have seen the missing patrol, but all insisted that the sound from the shore was wrong. In Muller's transcript, a note appears in parentheses, interference tone during interview. Magnetic tape distorted at minute 23. Naumann's manuscript, unfinished at his death in 1981, was later deposited in the Archiv für Zeitgeschichte in Munich. The file label reads simply, Peenemünde, Shoreline Rumor, 1944-46. Among his handwritten notes is one marginal annotation that continues to puzzle researchers. The field worker who recorded Müller's testimony disappeared 2 years later, last seen on the same coastal road driving toward Karlshagen. His recorder was found still running, filled with static. This single line bridges the documentary and the unexplained. It links a missing patrol in 1944 to an absent historian in 1979, both lost in the same geography, both erased by silence and sea. The correlation is circumstantial, but unsettling. When Kranz's successor, Dr. Jens Adler, reviewed Naumann's notes in 1990, he described the phenomenon as an archival echo, a recurrence of disappearance bound not by superstition, but by the continuity of inquiry itself. Peenemunde's physical landscape offers little evidence. The northern shoreline where the impressions were supposedly found has long since eroded. Satellite imaging places the 1944 observation post beneath several meters of sand and seawater. The Baltic currents shifted the contour of the coast after 1955, submerging what was once the patrol route. Marine archaeologists searching the area in 2002 located fragments of concrete, likely from fortifications, but nothing resembling the impressions described in the log. Yet sonar readings recorded anomalous depressions near the seabed, 3 elongated shapes equidistant from one another, each approximately 30 centimeters apart. The discovery report lists them as erosional features, anthropogenic origin undetermined. Historians remain divided over interpretation. Some classify the Nachtwache Buch as a technical anomaly, a record of radar interference misread as physical traces. Others, including Adler, argue that the importance lies not in the event, but in its deletion, the systematic removal of 4 consecutive nights from a network of logs that were otherwise meticulously kept. In that void, the human absence becomes both the subject and the method of the mystery. Even now, the provenance of the document is unresolved. Its paper type corresponds to the wartime Peenemünde stock. The handwriting matches at least 2 known technicians. Yet the content references a patrol formation that cannot be verified. The red flag mentioned in the entry has never been found, though wartime aerial photographs show a small dark object near the shoreline marker. On 14th September, an object that disappears in later frames. Whether that mark was a flag, a shadow, or an error of exposure remains unknown. What endures is the unease of documentation, the sense that something genuine recorded in the bureaucratic language of observation managed to survive despite every mechanism designed to erase it. The Nachtwache Buch stands at the intersection of verification and superstition, where the rational order of the archive begins to fray. And so, as Kranz wrote in her final unpublished note before retiring from the archive in 1983, all that is left are traces graphite salt and the silence between them. The more one reads, the less remains. Every question written into the file takes something else away. The Peenemünde fragment remains officially classified as isolated evidence. Its authenticity is accepted, its meaning unverified. 4 men, 4 nights, 4 missing pages. And one archivist, decades later, who warned that the act of reading too closely might itself continue the pattern. In the official wartime files, the Heeresversuchsanstalt Peenemünde remained a study in precision. Every action was documented in formed schedules and coded reports that left no space for imagination. The fact layer begins here, inside the Kriegstagebuch des Peenemünder Kontrollabschnittes, or War Diary of the Peenemünde Control Sector, preserved at the Bundesarchiv Militärarchiv in Freiburg. The entry for 14 September 1944 lists weather data: wind, still barometric pressure, 749 mHg, temperature, 11 degrees C. No launch activity. Security patrols continue standard intervals. No incidents reported. This line, signed by Lieutenant Hermann Kurtz, stands as the only surviving official statement corresponding to that date. It contradicts the Nachtwache Buch fragment completely. The discrepancy drew attention decades later when historian Dr. Jens Adler compared the Peenemünde War Diary with adjacent documents. He found that 3 separate units filed duplicate readings, the same numbers, handwriting style, and sequence of meteorological codes across 3 days. This duplication suggested transcription rather than observation. In Adler's own words, the records were rewritten after the fact. The conclusion is verifiable. Carbon transfer residues proved that the entries were copied mechanically, not penned during the events themselves. In bureaucratic archives, silence often carries a paper trail. Attached to the same folder was a memo from Oberst Hans Kammler, dated 21 September 1944, titled Reassignment of Perimeter Staff Section Nord. It ordered the immediate transfer of 4 unnamed men to the Thuringia construction detail. No names, no serial numbers, no arrival verification. The order's margins contain a small red annotation, initials HK, followed by the word Vollzogen, executed. This was the week the patrol supposedly vanished. The fact layer therefore holds its own ghost, a set of names erased by bureaucratic efficiency. The folklore layer, preserved through post-war oral accounts, tells a story that is not less exacting, only different in its fidelity. In 1959, during interviews for a local ethnographic survey in Wolgast County, fishermen from the small village of Karlshagen described the nights when the sea hummed. They spoke of a sound, not wind, not machinery, rising from the waterline near the old rocket fields. One man, Heinrich Rappe, then 74, recalled, "It came from the sand itself. You could feel it underfoot like breathing." His description was dismissed as superstition until magnetometer readings from the area, recorded decades later, revealed irregular fluctuations consistent with residual iron deposits. Yet no machinery lay buried there. Rapp's statement continued. After the war, we walked to the fence and saw that the dunes were different. The sand there kept the shape of what had stepped 3 marks wide apart, never filled by tide. The first storm erased them, but people still said they could hear something at night, as if it walked beneath. His words appeared in the unpublished appendix of the Wolgast Folklore Collection Tape 17B, recorded by fieldworker Hannah Metz. The main body of her report was destroyed in a storage fire in 1964, but this single transcript survived. Metz's field notes combine fragments of rumor with verifiable place names: the ruined fence, the coastal watchtower, the former fuel depot. She includes a remark often repeated in later oral accounts. The soldiers said the footprints came from a machine. The women said they came from what the machine woke. Returning to the fact layer, we encounter a different witness, engineer Karl-Heinz Fromm, the technician whose papers led to the discovery of the Nachtwache-Buch. Among his surviving maintenance reports is a typed memorandum dated 16 September 1944, acoustic anomaly along Sector Blau. Resonance within ground cable frequency, recommendation temporary shutdown. This memo is cross-referenced with a second unsigned sheet. An order was given to bury defective coils near the shoreline. In 1998, ground-penetrating radar confirmed the presence of metallic objects near the estimated burial site. They were removed and catalogued by the Technische Bundesanstalt, twisted copper and glass, identified as remnants of communication relays. The objects emitted faint magnetic interference still detectable after 50 years. In folklore, this interference took a different name. In 1961, Karlshagen's surviving residents referred to das Singen des Bodens, the singing of the ground. The phrase reappears in 3 separate oral histories collected by Dr. Rolf Naumann in the late 1970s. In one recording, a former nurse named Lieselotte Brenner recounted a recurring dream. I heard the steps before I woke. They were heavy but slow, like someone testing their weight on sand. When I looked from the window, the sea glowed not light, not fire, but something like veins under skin. Between 1944 and 1945, similar imagery emerged in intercepted Allied intelligence. A decoded British signal filed under Ultra CX MSS 1945-234 references unusual night luminescence reported by pilots over Usedom coast. Declassified in 1997, the report interprets the sightings as coastal phosphorus discharges due to munitions oxidation. Yet the timing coincides with the same nights missing from the Nachtwache-Buch. Fact and folklore merge at their edges, each filling what the other omits. The factual record notes oxidation, acoustic resonance, and environmental interference. The oral testimonies replace those terms with breathing sand, singing ground, and walking tide. Both describe the same event: something seen, something heard, something no one could record directly. A surviving communication log from Peenemunde's control bunker, catalogued under file number HVA-TS 44-326, records a broken transmission on the night of 14th September. Patrol. 2. Reporting disturbance. Repeat disturbance on, followed by 6 seconds of static and termination. The next entry, time-stamped 0203 hours, reads, signal loss attributed to electrical storm. Proceed as normal. Meteorological records show no storm that night. Folklore offers its echo in the story of the Black Shore Men, a tale told by Baltic fishermen after the war. According to the legend, the Germans built machines that could summon the wind, but forgot to stop them. The machines turned on themselves, calling to the things beneath. In one version collected in 1962, 3 guards disappeared into the surf, leaving behind prints like the foot of a bird, but made for a man. The storyteller insists they were not taken by the sea. The sea only carried what was already walking. Fact returns with silence. The official Seaside Patrol Directive No. 27, dated 22 September 1944, forbids all personnel from entering the northern beach area. The stated reason: unexploded ordnance and soft ground. This order remained active until the end of the war. In post-war interrogations, former officers were asked to explain the closure. One Hauptmann Kurt Jaeger replied, "There were collapses like sinkholes. The sand behaved oddly. We were told not to question physics." Meanwhile, in the folklore layer, odd physics became myth. Children of the region sang a rhyme: where rockets sleep and the sea is blind, step too near and leave no sign. The rhyme survived into the 1980s, long after the site had been fenced off and converted into a museum. When linguists traced its origin, they found the earliest recording on a tape labeled Wolgast Nursery Collection, 1947. The same melody includes the refrain, "The tide does not walk." In 2004, an excavation near Peenemunde's northern shore uncovered remnants of a collapsed tunnel. Inside were fragments of wire mesh, wooden planks, and human bone. The bones were partial, incomplete, weathered, and chemically altered by saltwater exposure. Forensic tests dated them to the mid-1940s. DNA could not be extracted. The official excavation report listed the find as non-diagnostic remains. The folklore record, however, already contained a version of this discovery, a song sung by workers rebuilding the area in 1948, recorded by folklorist Ingrid Sommer. One verse reads, 4 men went down, 4 lanterns turned, 3 came back, and 1 still burned. Fact and folklore now converge in rhythm. Both speak of 4 men, 4 lights, and a return that never occurred. The logbook's red flag marker becomes the 4th lantern, the last sign seen before erasure. The scientific explanation, erosion, resonance, atmospheric refraction, does not cancel the superstition. It mirrors it. Each offers the other half of the language required to describe what happened on that shore. In the archive, the factual trail stops with an empty folder labeled Nord Station Concluded. In oral memory, the story continues to move through rhymes, through dreams, through phrases repeated by those who never saw the event but live within its echo. Both forms preserve something beyond data, the persistence of a question. When Dr. Adler revisited the site in 1992, he brought with him a portable recorder. Standing on the same northern beach, he spoke into the microphone. The documents are silent, but the ground still hums. A faint vibration is audible on the tape, low, irregular, continuous. He left a note in his field report, dated June 1992, possibly interference from distant turbines. The folklore of Karlshagen remembers the same hum differently. Locals say it is the breathing of the buried machines. Some insist it is the memory of the 4 men walking back to shore, never reaching it. The two explanations do not contradict. They coexist, 2 registers of the same truth, one written in graphite, the other sung in salt and air. What remains of that night is neither legend nor record, but the distance between them. The factual archive defines what can be proven. The folklore archive preserves what refuses to end. Together they form a pattern, a song of truths repeating through paper, sand, and voice, the sound of something that walked once and never returned. In the war diary of Peenemunde's Coastal Command, the official version remains absolute. Patrol 2 status concluded. No survivors were found. Environmental hazard confirmed. The phrase appears twice, stamped and restamped in the same carbon ink, as though repetition could strengthen its authority. The report is dated 18th of September 1944, signed by Lieutenant Kurtz and witnessed by Hauptmann Kammler. The lines are brief, factual, complete. Yet the next page, where follow-up orders should continue, is missing. Only the carbon impression of a single word presses faintly through the page beneath returned. In oral memory, that same night did not end with silence. One testimony from the Wolgast folklore collection recounts, when the lamps went dark on the beach, the sea kept flashing. Not lightning, more like breath. Someone said it was the rockets. But the rockets had stopped that week. The storyteller, an elderly woman identified only as GM, described hearing drums beneath the water, slow and heavy like the rhythm of pumps. They answered all night, she said, and when they stopped, the fog rose higher. In contrast, a memorandum preserved in the Technische Abteilung Peenemünde details an emergency inspection of shoreline equipment. The typed note reads, "Resonance detected along buried cable conduit. Structural subsidence possible. Crew instructed to fill with sand and concrete." The note ends abruptly mid-sentence, further assessment to be followed by torn paper. The surviving margin bears an underlined annotation. Priority, silence. By 1944, the line between engineering report and field rumor had grown thin. Security officers monitored gossip as closely as equipment malfunctions. A Bericht über Arbeitsdisziplin found in the same archive box lists disciplinary actions taken against technical personnel, spreading metaphysical claims regarding shoreline phenomena. The listed penalty reassignment to Thuringia. 3 names follow. One is Fromm, yet the folklore continues under different names. A fisherman's son interviewed in 1976 recalled his father's story of the night the sea listened. His transcript reads, "They said the guards shouted into the fog, but their voices didn't come back. It was as if the air took them and answered with its own echo." The interviewer notes interference on the tape, a high-pitched hum increasing during the witness's pauses. The same hum reappears decades later in the recording of Dr. Adler's 1992 field visit. The audio spectrogram shows a repeating pulse at 12.4 Hz, too low for ambient machinery, too steady for wind. When compared to magnetometer readings from the area, the frequency aligns with the magnetic anomaly detected near the former shoreline. The report concludes source indeterminate, possibly residual field from buried cables. But the folklore transcript answers differently. It is not the cables that hum. It is the ground remembering. The munitions inventory for September 1944 lists 4 missing battery lamps, 3 signal flares, and 1 field radio. Each item marked lost to sea. The shipping logs confirm no recovery, yet an Allied reconnaissance photograph taken on 15 September shows 3 bright points along the Peenemünde coast points not visible in daytime images. The official British note describes them as shore beacons. The German file claims there were none. The next available German report, filed 1 day later, states enemy aircraft not sighted. Visual disturbances at sea attributed to phosphorescent algae. In oral testimony, the same moment becomes myth. The soldiers said the water lit from within. They saw figures where there should be light. These contradictions multiply. Report no survivors were found. Oral record. But the drums still answered that night. A secondary document from 1945, drafted by the Sonderkommission für Küstenschutz, attempts to close the matter. Incident 14, Ings 44. Complete loss due to misadventure. Area sealed. The seal remains on record. Yet inside the Karlshagen Municipal Archive, a civilian letter dated October 1944 contradicts it. We were told to stay indoors. The soldiers buried something on the beach. They worked without lamps. The letter's author, Martha Vogt, signed her name carefully, perhaps not realizing her testimony would one day bridge fact and folklore. She wrote, "In the morning, there were no footprints, only holes, perfect round holes, as if someone had set down 3 bowls in the sand." Later that month, Die Rakete, the internal Peenemünde technical bulletin, issued a short correction to its personnel roster. Effective immediately, Station Nord reduced, night patrol discontinued. The announcement appears mundane, an administrative line among hundreds. Yet beside it, handwritten in pencil, an anonymous note: "The sea took the watch. We do not guard it anymore." One broken record lies within the archives of the Soviet occupation authorities, recovered from the Smersh investigation. Dossier File 421B. It records the interrogation of a captured German engineer who spoke of voices in the cables and orders without senders. The transcript ends with interrogation interrupted. Subject transferred to Moscow. No further information. The following page is blank except for the faint imprint of the last word returned. Fromm's letters, meanwhile, grow shorter toward the end of 1944. The last, dated 12 October, contains only 3 lines. "The nights are longer now. The sand moves, though no one walks. Tell the children not to come here." His wife filed a missing person report in December. The document bears a notation: presumed evacuation casualty. In folklore, the same date becomes a vigil. The people of Karlshagen spoke of 4 lamps left burning at the shore, 1 for each man who did not return. In the fisherman's oral song collected in 1948, the refrain repeats, "4 went out, 4 lights burned. 3 went dark, and 1 still turned." The melody mirrors a Lutheran hymn, but uses a minor progression uncommon to the region. When ethnomusicologists later analyzed it, they discovered a rhythm consistent with Morse timing for the letters RET. The broken documents echo that same fragment returned. Always incomplete, always without subject. No one returned yet. The record insists on the word. Even within bureaucratic language, the erasures are visible. A maintenance log from 15 September contains a series of vertical dashes where readings should appear. In the margin, a faint note. Instrument froze. No temperature anomaly recorded, no electrical fault documented. It simply froze the machines like the men stopped mid-sequence. The oral records mirror that paralysis in sound. Listeners described a sudden stillness, then vibration through the sand. "The lamps flickered," said one, "and the air became thick like oil." Another recalled the impression of someone standing beside him, though the post was empty. "We spoke," he said, and the words fell. Later, when the shoreline was cleared, Soviet engineers discovered fragments of concrete embedded with metallic residue. One of them, Colonel V. Ivanov, filed a brief statement: "Coastal section unstable. Observed localized sinkage, possible munitions pocket." His report was never followed up. A subsequent note in another hand reads only, "The colonel fell ill, returned home." A recurring pattern emerges: every document ends either in loss or in the word returned applied to those who did not. In the oral histories, the pattern becomes liturgy. Witnesses speak of a sound heard when standing still, a low hum that seemed to answer itself. Some called it the breath of the machines. Others said it was the ground singing back. A woman living near the site described dreams of soldiers walking across the water, each carrying a red lantern. "They stop halfway," she said, "and look down as if something below is calling their names." Cross-reference returns us to the records: no survivors were found. The oral testimony: "But the drums still answered that night." Between them lies a page torn out, an erased signature, a missing timestamp. In 1978, when Dr. Naumann reviewed the Soviet translation of Peenemünde files, he noticed the word Kammler crossed out in pencil wherever it appeared. On one folder spine, a faint note survived beneath correction fluid: "Do not open Nord section." The next line reads, "Classified under incident of resonance." The word resonance appears nowhere in folklore, yet it explains both sound and silence. Villagers used a different term, Nachklang, the echo that comes after sound ends. They believed the ground kept memory like a bell. When asked about the vanished patrol, one elder replied simply, "They did not die. They were absorbed." Every subsequent attempt to close the record fails by omission. Report area secured, incident concluded. Oral record. But the lamps still burn beneath the water. When archivists in the 1980s began digitizing Peenemunde's surviving documents, they noted a recurring corruption in the scanned images of the Nachtwache. Each digital file contained a single line of static along the same margin, unreadable, unexplainable. Attempts to correct the distortion resulted in data loss. The technicians labeled the issue ghosting. On one corrupted scan, a partial phrase survives in the bleed-through of erased ink, and they were called back. No punctuation follows. The pattern of contradictions continues, not resolving but deepening. Each verified fact leaves behind its shadow. Each story preserves what the record excludes. The missing patrol becomes not an event, but a structure, a space shaped by absence, echoed through every document that tries to seal it. And still across both archives and memories, one refrain repeats, no survivors were found. But the drums still answered that night. In 1952, during the first cartographic survey of post-war coastal migration in northern Germany, the Bundesamt für Küstenschutz published a series of topographic maps detailing how the Baltic shoreline had shifted since 1944. The northern edge of Usedom Island, where the Peenemünde research base once stood, had retreated nearly 40 meters inland. The maps showed that the original Station Nord, the site of the vanished patrol, now lay underwater, marked only by a contour line labeled unstable sediment. Yet across multiple archival versions, one notation persists in the same handwriting underlined in blue pencil. Localized depression, circular depth indeterminate. No scientific commentary accompanies it. The cartographer Dr. Otto Wernicke later admitted in correspondence that he had not made that mark himself. In a 1963 letter to the Deutsche Hydrographische Gesellschaft, he wrote, I noticed the notation after the map was printed. It seemed to have appeared on the copperplate between proofs. We destroyed the plate. Wernicke dismissed it as an engraving error. Still, the anomaly appears in 2 additional reprints uncorrected, as if the imprint had migrated through duplication. Fact in this period begins to reflect itself. Records spawning records, each confirming what no one directly observed. The Peenemünde Settlement Register, 1955, lists 4 unclaimed pension accounts belonging to workers missing after September 1944. Their names are absent from all other documentation, but their families continued to receive mail addressed to the old base postmarked from no identifiable office. The envelopes contained no letters, only blank sheets folded twice. In contrast, the folklore that grew along the Baltic villages adopted the image of letters that never spoke. Locals called them stumme brief, mute letters. Within a decade, the phrase evolved into a superstition. When fishermen found empty bottles at sea, they said they carried the silence from Peenemünde. One oral account collected by ethnographer Hanna Metz's successor, Friedrich Lenz, records a ritual performed during the annual herring season. Before casting nets, the oldest fisherman would touch the water 3 times with the tip of his oar and recite, "Send back the ones who walked too far." Lenz, in his 1971 field diary, observed that none of the participants could explain the ritual's origin. It feels older than the war, one said. Another added, it was for the men who watched at night so the sea would not take them again. At the same time, the factual record deepens its own mythology through correspondence. A letter dated March 1969, sent from the Bundesarchiv to Dr. Hilde Kranz's estate, reports the discovery of a missing V2 operations logbook fragment in a Soviet repository. The page is badly burned but legible in parts. It includes the following notation. Shoreline anomaly persists. Patrols suspended. Subject recorded as return phenomenon. Below it, an engineer's initials appear KHF, matching Karl-Heinz Fromm. The document analyzed under ultraviolet light reveals an erased sentence faintly visible. Sound identical to prior dream description. The phrase is strange within a military report, yet it mirrors a motif repeated across post-war dreams collected by Naumann and others. In the folklore archive, 3 witnesses describe hearing or dreaming the same pattern. 3 sounds, rhythmic, hollow, distant, like something calling names underwater. Thus emerges the mirrored structure, the bureaucratic term return phenomenon, and the folk phrase calling names underwater. Both describe recurrence, both locate the inexplicable in repetition. Another factual echo surfaces in the 1975 publication Zeitschrift für Physikalische Anomalien, where researchers from Greifswald University documented low-frequency resonance phenomena near the Peenemünde seabed. Their paper, based on magnetometer readings, concludes that unknown ferromagnetic masses might be shifting periodically under tidal pressure. But a footnote reveals the scientists' unease. Signal form irregular, resembles patterned pulse rather than random vibration. The same year, in a small Lutheran chapel at Karlshagen, a retired priest named Ernst Wachter held a requiem for the lost watchers of the sea. Local fishermen described the ceremony as a stiller Gottesdienst, a silent service. No names were read aloud. Instead, Wachter placed 4 stones on the altar, each marked only with a cross. Parish records confirm the ritual took place annually from 1975 to 1983, always on 14th September. After his death, the service was discontinued, though his successor noted parishioners continued to leave candles near the shoreline on that date. In the archive, those candles correspond to faint signals on the magnetic survey maps, small pulses of heat visible in nighttime aerial photographs, glowing precisely where the shoreline impressions once were. The official explanation calls them campfire remnants. But when compared over time, the light sources recur in the same triangular formation unchanged by erosion or wind. By the late 1970s, these coincidences had attracted both scientists and spiritualists. The Berlin Journal für Parapsychologie, an obscure publication later banned under the GDR, printed an article titled Echoes of the V2 Shore. The anonymous author signing as AD proposed that the Peenemünde anomaly represented a resonant memory field created by the extreme electromagnetic output of wartime experiments. According to this theory, the vibrations recorded in the soil were not natural, but psychic residues of trauma, the sea remembering the men who vanished. The article's citations, however, lead back to conventional data, meteorological logs, magnetic readings, tidal charts. Science and superstition had become indistinguishable in their evidence. One footnote quotes directly from Psalm 69, "The waters are come in unto my soul." Around the same time, a spiritual folk song circulated among Baltic refugees resettled in Lübeck. Recorded by ethnomusicologist Ingrid Sommer in 1980, it bears the title, Wir wachen vor Watchers. The lyrics blend prayer and testimony. We watched the sea, and the sea watched back. We called the names, and the wind gave them back. Not gone, not found, not free. The melody repeats 4 lines of descending minor chords, each ending in a sustained hum rather than a final note. Sommer's field notes describe the singer, an elderly woman named Annelies Vogt, as reciting rather than singing, as if remembering a code. In the factual domain, that same year marked renewed military interest in the site. The Bundeswehr Coastal Research Unit conducted sonar mapping of the underwater area once occupied by Station Nord. Their report, declassified in 2005, notes metallic anomalies arranged in a non-random pattern resembling equipment foundations. The final page carries a single handwritten comment from the mission leader. Sounds like breathing through the speaker. Fact and folklore are now inseparable reflections. Each confirms what the other fears to claim. The oral dream of breathing ground meets the sonar description of breathing through the speaker. The hymn's unfinished hum corresponds to the unending magnetic pulse. The mute letters of the fisherman's superstition echo the blank correspondence mailed from the base's address. The historian's disappearance mirrors the patrol's. The pattern repeats 4 men, 4 lights, 4 stones, 4 pulses. In 1989, just before her death, Dr. Hilde Krantz wrote a private note found among her papers. I no longer believe this is a matter of lost persons. The absence itself behaves like a presence. Her wording resembles that of a spiritual report more than a historian's, yet it captures the paradox at the heart of the Peenemünde mystery. The fact layer had begun to speak in metaphors. The folklore had begun to cite evidence. The villagers' children, now grown, continued the candle ritual. Some added small red flags instead of flowers, a reference to the Nachtwachebuch. In their own explanation, the gesture was not mourning but acknowledgement. It keeps the water quiet, said one. If we forget, the sand moves again. Dream accounts collected in the 1990s show recurrence of the same imagery, standing at the shoreline, hearing an approaching vibration, then waking before it arrives. Psychologists studying the phenomenon referred to it as Peenemünde syndrome, a localized dream contagion among residents born decades after the war. Their research suggested environmental causes, perhaps low-frequency sound or magnetic resonance. But one participant described something more personal. I never knew the story until I dreamed it. Then my grandmother said, yes, that's how they went. The reconstruction of migration maps, letters, hymns, and dreams converges into a mirror. The maps show depressions where the songs describe footsteps. The letters carry silence where the prayers leave space for response. The sound engineers note resonance where the villagers hear breath. Each source confirms its counterpart through negation. The factual records of the Cold War era close with one final document site remains unstable. Recommend permanent closure. It is dated 14 September 1994, exactly 50 years after the disappearance. The signature is illegible. The official seal overlaps with an earlier stamp faintly visible beneath Heeresversuchsanstalt Peenemünde. Somehow the pre-war mark had imprinted through the newer ink like a ghost beneath fresh paper. Folklore names this repetition Der Widerschein, the reflection that does not fade. It is the belief that what once touched the world leaves a second image beneath it, invisible, but enduring. In that sense, the story of the vanished patrol is less about their loss than about the persistence of their outline. To this day, locals claim that on windless nights the sand near the northern shore vibrates softly, a pulse so faint it feels imagined. Visitors call it superstition. Scientists call it residual frequency. The difference is not meaning but direction. One looks downward into the ground, the other upward into memory. In both, the same vibration continues steady, rhythmic, unanswered. At Peenemünde, the facts remain buried in salt and steel, and the faith lingers in candlelight and dream. Each reflects the other, a mirror of absence and remembrance. When the wind falls still and the waves withdraw, both tell the same story in different tongues. The watchers are gone, yet the watch continues. The investigation into the Peenemünde fragment concluded officially in 1995. The archival committee declared the Nachtwache Buch non-essential, reclassifying it as private record of unverified origin. The entry was removed from the central registry and relocated to a secondary vault in Berlin under the heading Miscellaneous Wartime Materials. Yet the file does not end where bureaucracy intended. Beneath the last inventory sheet lies a page misfiled from another collection, the transcription of an oral interview recorded in 1979. The voice is that of an old fisherman, Heinrich Rappe, speaking to field worker Ernst Wachter. The words are slow, fragmented, half-whispered. They say the shore was quiet, but it was not. The water was breathing that night. The drums, the deep ones, they answered again. That single phrase, the drums kept answering, echoes the opening line of the first recovered fragment from 1944. The report of the guard who saw lamp signals extinguish and footprints vanish toward the sea. In the hook, the document ended with the words, "Do not speak of this again." In this interview, the silence breaks not through confession, but through repetition. The same sound that ended the patrol's report returns in the memory of a fisherman who was a boy when it happened. The echo has crossed half a century. The factual record continues to resist closure. The last geological survey of Peenemunde's northern coast, conducted in 2003, detected subsurface cavities exhibiting cyclical resonance. The summary line states, without elaboration, acoustic field active. When a journalist from Der Spiegel requested access to the full data, the response from the Federal Archive was brief, no further material available. At the same time, local residents noticed an unusual pattern. Each year, around mid-September, the sea near the old station would fall completely still for several minutes. No wind, no movement, no birds. One resident described it as the sea listening. Another compared it to a collective pause, as if something beneath was waiting for a signal. Fact and folklore begin to dissolve into one another here. In the archives, there is an entry dated 14th September 1999, a memorandum from the Peenemünde Historical Center, which now occupies part of the former base. The director notes a visitor report. A low humming was heard in the exhibition hall during the closing hour. Source not found. Maintenance checked electrical systems, no fault. The curator added, almost as an afterthought, coincided with anniversary of missing patrol. The following night, according to witness statements gathered by a maintenance worker, the museum's lights flickered for exactly 20 seconds, then returned to normal. The timing recorded on the power log 01:47 hours, the same hour marked in the original 1944 logbook. The echo motif persists in the smallest details. In the hook, the patrol leader described marking the site with a red flag. In 2007, during restoration of the shoreline path, workers uncovered a corroded metal pole painted in faded red primer. It stood embedded in compacted sand bent toward the sea. When they pulled it out, they found beneath it a hollow space, perfectly shaped like a footprint. 3 deep impressions preserved by mineral sediment. The site supervisor wrote, "No sign of tool marks, no indication of hoax." The sample was sent for testing. The results were inconclusive. The cavity was later filled for safety reasons. No one wrote again about it in official records. But in oral memory, the discovery became another verse in the ongoing song. Children of Karlshagen began to include it in the local rhyme once used to warn each other away from the ruins: step too near and leave no sign. The tide still walks when stars align. That rhyme carries the rhythm of the drums. 3 beats. Pause. 3 beats again. In 2010, acoustic researchers analyzing the region's underwater frequencies detected a recurring pattern: 3 pulses, silence, 3 pulses, silence. The data matches the cadence of the children's rhyme and the spacing of the footprints found in 1944. The report concludes, anomalous repetition. Unknown mechanical source. This is the point where explanation gives way to reflection. Historians continue to argue over whether the missing patrol was the victim of sinkholes, wartime mines, or Soviet cover-up. Yet every attempt to resolve the mystery collapses into the same pattern of echoes: official reports, duplicated letters repeating sentences, names vanishing only to reappear as initials decades later. Even the absence of evidence seems structured, rhythmic, deliberate. The testimonies recorded in the late 20th century add another layer: the dreams. Survivors' descendants describe hearing low percussion in their sleep, always 3 beats fading into water. A retired soldier once stationed nearby reported that he could not sleep without the sound of waves. Silence made him anxious. "It feels like they are counting," he said. "Something waiting to be answered." One dream testimony filed by psychologist Anke Riedel in 2013 stands out for its precision. The patient, a woman born in 1984, who had never visited Usedom, described a recurring dream in which she walks along a beach carrying a red flag. The sand beneath her feet vibrates like a drumhead. She plants the flag into the ground and hears faintly the sound of breathing. When shown the Nachtwache Buch transcription, she recognized the phrase, "The tide does not walk," she said. "That's the line I wake up to." No rational connection exists between her and the lost patrol. Yet the recurrence of imagery, red flag breathing, sand rhythm of three binds fact and folklore in perfect reflection. The motif has outlived its witnesses. It now exists as memory without subject. In 2015, researchers at the Peenemünde Historical Center attempted a digital reconstruction of the lost shoreline. Using combined data from 1944 aerial photos and modern sonar, they generated a topographic model. When the simulation's sound layer was played, it produced interference, a deep cyclical pulse that repeated every 40 seconds. The project manager, Dr. Leonhard Schmid, noted the effect in his log. Audio distortion synchronized with the model's playback. Possibly feedback loop, but his assistant added a handwritten remark in the margin, "Sounds like drums." The recording, known internally as File Echo 44, is stored in the museum's private archive. Its length is 5 minutes and 12 seconds. The final minute is silence, save for a faint creak, wood or wind, followed by 3 low pulses. Afterward, nothing. When the recording was played publicly during an anniversary exhibition in 2019, several visitors reported feeling pressure in the chest during the playback. One described it as the air leaning closer. Another said, "It felt like waiting for someone to speak." The curator ended the playback early. The same exhibition included an installation of the Nachtwache Buch fragments. The last page displayed the sentence, "They said it was the tide, but the tide does not walk." At closing, an elderly man approached the curator and whispered that he had once served on the recovery team after the 1943 bombing. He said he remembered a sergeant who disappeared near the northern post. "He was the one who kept the drum," the man said. When asked what he meant, he replied, "He banged it every night to test the ground. After he was gone, the sound still came." The man left no name. The staff later checked the visitor log, no signature, no ticket under his description. Only an entry at 1711 marked guest military veteran. Through all records, the motif remains sound, without source, rhythm, without performer. The drums kept answering. At this stage in the narrative, analysis ceases to function. Each echo multiplies. Each silence becomes heavier than speech. The archive transforms into its own ritual, repeating documents as if reciting prayers. The bureaucratic refrain, "No survivors were found," stands beside the oral refrain, but the drums still answered that night. Together they form a chorus of absence. In the closing paragraph of her final notebook, Dr. Kranz copied that phrase and added one line beneath it. "No one wrote again." The sentence is underlined twice, then followed by 3 dots, ellipsis, as pause, as silence, as space left for an answer that never came. If one listens long enough, both the factual and the mythical converge into the same geometry. 3 pulses in the sand, 3 dots on a page, 3 men never returned. Each repetition narrows the distance between the record and the echo until they become indistinguishable. And so the story rises toward its quietest point. The shoreline has no witnesses left. The archive, no explanations. The drums, the breath, the hum beneath the sea all persist indifferent to who listens. No one wrote again, but the drums kept answering. The Nachtwache Buch fragment now rests in a climate-controlled drawer inside the Peenemünde Historical Technical Museum accession number, PMA 44 Nord, fragment 1. The paper is pale as dust, the handwriting almost gone, its graphite eaten by salt. The tag beneath the glass reads simply, "Anonymous Report, September 14, 1944. Visitors often pass by without pause until they read the final line. They said it was the tide, but the tide does not walk. After that, they rarely speak." It took 50 years for the document to find its way here. It was recovered in 1972 from an estate in Bremen, catalogued by Dr. Hilde Kranz, analyzed by Dr. Rolf Naumann, and later verified by Dr. Jens Adler, 3 archivists who never met, yet followed the same silence. Their combined work fills a shelf in the Bundesarchiv Militärarchiv in Freiburg. The current record lists it as material incomplete, origin probable. Beneath that printed conclusion, someone has written in pencil, "The drums kept answering." Factually, everything should be settled. The patrol likely drowned or was buried by collapsing dunes. The 3 towed impressions could have been remains of equipment. The rhythmic sound a coincidence of tide and machinery. Every rational explanation leads there. And yet none of the researchers who visited the site ever returned satisfied. Each reported the same phenomenon, a vibration underfoot, a low hum when the air falls still. Every September at roughly 01:47 hours it repeats the time marked in the 1944 report. In 2021, a museum guard filed an incident note heard drumming beneath floor of North Wing. Duration 20 seconds. The technicians tested every mechanical source. None matched the frequency. They archived the recording as ambient interference. When replayed on headphones, the sound falls in threes, 3 pulses, pause, 3 again. The oral side of history kept evolving as well. In Karlshagen, children still sing the old rhyme. 4 lights went out, 4 lights burned, 3 fell silent, 1 returned. The last line once ended differently and 1 still burned. Over time it changed almost unnoticed. 1 returned. A correction by memory itself, turning loss into motion. Dream records echo the same pattern. Descendants of workers born long after the war describe walking in sleep along a shore where something breathes beneath the sand. Always 3 beats. Always the sense of being watched from below. Psychologists call it localized inherited imagery. Locals simply say, the ground remembers. The documents and the dreams now face each other like mirrors. In one silence becomes a measurement. In the other silence becomes a voice. The repetition of symbols, drum's breath, flag tide forms a rhythm beyond explanation. Each reappears, each answers the other. The echo is no longer evidence. It is the event itself. In 2019, when the museum recreated the shoreline through digital sound modeling, the computer's audio output froze at the final line of the simulation. The speaker emitted 3 slow pulses before shutting down. The technician wrote, "System stopped at 01:47. Cause unknown." The recording was saved as Echo 44. When played, it ends in deep silence, followed by the faintest trace of rhythm, the same cadence noted in 1944, 3 steps, pause, 3 again, pause. Every investigation concludes at the same point. The missing men remain missing. The explanation remains incomplete. The hum persists, unclassified, unclaimed. The archival sentence that begins with absence now closes with endurance. The watchers vanish, yet the watch continues. At some level, the meaning turns inward. The more historians seek the truth of Peenemünde, the further away it moves, as if the story exists only in the act of pursuit. Every attempt to contain it becomes another echo, another repetition of the same unanswered call. What remains constant is the rhythm, a memory of footsteps across water, recorded in graphite, retold in lullabies, measured in frequencies. And here in the end, the question reverses. For 80 years we have asked what happened to them, but perhaps the real disappearance lies elsewhere. The documents repeat, the sea repeats, the hum repeats. What if the ones who vanished are not the men who walked into the tide, but the witnesses who stopped listening? Maybe they didn't disappear, maybe we did. The sound remains. The drums keep answering even when no one names them. The silence is not absence. It is continuation, the proof that memory outlives evidence. History, like the sea, never forgets. It only waits for us to hear its frequency again. You have just heard another record from Shadow Stories. If you wish to hear what still echoes beneath history, subscribe and keep listening.